Hey, welcome to the basement. This is the place from where I do my remote. And since your first reading assignment is a whopping 74 pages, wanted to check in because, full disclosure, normally we split the reading that you're doing now into two. You would only be reading to page 35 for one reading, and then page 74 as you are for the second reading. We assigned two at once because of these freshman days. We lost a day of class, but not a day of school. So in order to stay on pace with where we normally would be this time of year, you had to do a double reading, which means you're learning a lot about the Milwaukee people and Conquo without anyone there to bounce questions and ideas off. So I just want to have a pseudo class here where I check in and talk about some of the things that I normally check in with students on during this first week. So what I want to start with is reminding you that I put out there that you should have watched the video titled "The Danger of a Single Story" by the African author Aditi, Chibe Aditi. And not only does she express how much Chibe's work meant to her, but also that idea of how much a single story of a culture or a person can define them in a way that is incomplete. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, what is it that this novel, Things Fall Apart, is doing to respect that idea and to make it complete? And there is a pull, an urge for that completeness to be a celebration of equality and positivity and good feelings, and no doubt in our everyday work, life, kindness to each other. I certainly hope it does. But that doesn't allow us to explore the human condition in a way that is necessary for society itself to grow and change. Why is it that people of color are held to a certain moral standard that is higher than the predominant Western or white individual? And certainly one of the questions that immediately is forced upon us as we meet our protagonists. Okonkwo is the guy that we're stuck with. And he represents a concept, this idea of masculine African strength. And after all this setup, you might have expected to go in there and say, this is supposed to make me identify with this guy, even though I grew up white or Southeast Asian or what have you. We have quite a mix, of course. I don't want to make any presumptions. I'm supposed to connect with this mythical creature from a fictional Igbo village because I'm going to see some humanity in him. It's going to make me feel connected. But of course, we want those connections to be something like the spirit of giving of a Santa Claus, or a lesson online, something simple. But real humanity is more complex. And the humanity of a Okonkwo is not perfect. It's very, very imperfect. And so we have to ask ourselves questions of, well, where does that come from? And to just do a sort of momentary sidetrack, we already recognize that literature can do this, right? It's something we expect from literature. The literature will force us to ask questions about human nature, both the positive, but also what pulls us in. I don't want to say negative, but in directions that we don't necessarily control or don't necessarily recognize. And so let me just throw this out here, that you have cheered on a character like Okonkwo before. Here's a selection of some of them. You've got the Walter White, or Deadpool, Dexter, or Tyrion Lannister, or even Batman. These are all white anti-heroes that can carry the crux of a plot, and their foibles, their failings, are human failings, and through that we say, like, I understand that guy. Now, these characters are also all afforded some pretty incredible arcs, and so sometimes simple failings are turned into things that are incredibly hedonistic, like a Tyrion, or sadistic, like a Walter White. Walter White, by the end of that series, maybe wouldn't be afforded this forgiveness, but at first, the reason you're willing to follow him is that while you yourself aren't going to become a meth dealer, I hope, you see what is pulling him is human. So why should that only be afforded to white characters? Why not have a African protagonist that is incredibly complex? So one of the first questions that you would have been asked, when I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to run through some of the hot seats that you would have had if we had a 2-page 35 class. We're not going to have a page 74 class, so the questions are going to be a little different. But one of the questions to ask is, why do we think that Okonkwo is introduced in this way, with this idea of a wrestling match, and the sort of things that Okonkwo values, his relationship with his father, and what a reinterpretation of this as a piece of humanities, an exploration of the human makeup. Is it forces a re-examination. You can't make assumptions. Right? So, who is the narrator? The narrator is third person, and it seems sympathetic to Okonkwo. It respects his strength. It's impressed this narrator by his wrestling feats. So in turn, does that mean that narrator isn't giving us the full picture on first read of this village? So, women. They don't seem to get a fair shake in this culture. They are expected to be polygamous. Okonkwo even beats them. And so because our focus is so much on Okonkwo, why do we miss out that on page... one of the things that I like to share is I am cheap, and so I buy a lot of used text. And I got a student text here. Try to hold it up for you. Sometimes it's hard to find my own notes because my text is littered with this pink pen. And whoever this student is does not know how to annotate, because she, I believe, is she, because it says it's your girl. Maddie. She likes to underline things like Okonkwo is hungry, and then she'll underline it and say, like, this means that Okonkwo is hungry. Very good annotation. What that means is it makes it very hard for me to find my own annotations. On page 43, it's a little bit beyond page 35. On page 43, at that moment, and this chapter's action is surrounding the women, they heard someone crying just outside their compound. It was very much like Obiageli, Nwoye's sister. Is that not Obiageli weeping? Ekwefe called across the yard to Nwoye's mother. So the narrator makes no comment here on, like, whoa, isn't that amazing? We have to do some work to punch through the narrator's own perspective and say, like, whoa, the women are so in tune with this family. While it may be polygamous, while it may be something that we, Western culture are not familiar with, they're so in tune with their children that as a group, they don't have to see the child who is crying to understand who it was and possibly even what the problem might be. And so you're encouraged here to look at these characters and say, like, this is what I see through the narrator's eyes, but then this is what I see through the author's eyes, and that might not be the same. Unoko, Okonkwo's father. Okonkwo makes him out to be a clown. Unoka. How do you feel about it? Like, do a reread. Look at those scenes again. He plays flute. Seems like a cool guy to be around. Is he really so bad? And so there's this critique of culture here. And to take that even further, on page 32, the villagers discuss another village. They discuss the village of Obodowani. If a man dies at this time, he is not buried, but cast into the evil forest. And you'll find that many things are cast into the evil forest that you are not comfortable with. And nobody's asking you to be comfortable with it. But here it says, it is a bad custom which these people observe because they, that's not Westerners, that's not white people, they, that's the village of Obodowani, fellow Igbo people, village to village, excuse me. They throw away large numbers of men and women without burial, meaning they just cast their bodies into the forest. And what is the result? Their clan is full of the evil spirits of these unburied dead, hungry to do harm to the living. What a critique here that this tiny village in Mwafia within these evil people are saying, like, those people over there don't know what they're doing. They're crazy. What savages. So there's a larger critique of, like, maybe you need to have more of a human perspective before you judge these people. Do not trust your own biases towards human behavior to be the only thing that the author Chinua Achebe wants to show you about these people. There is no separating Okonkwo from his role as a beater of his wives. There's no asking you to be comfortable with that. There's no expectation that we ignore that. But the question I think that we are asked is, what are we doing if we give that the only story to Okonkwo? If that's the only story that we have of him, isn't that an incomplete picture of the culture that made him? Isn't that a single story to focus on those things? Isn't there a call to understand all the stories? And that is a good reminder to look at the stories and what sort of stories people identify with and why they tell that to themselves. And then what I wanted to end with is what is strength and what is weakness? Is Okonkwo a strong or a weak? It's probably a good thing for us to discuss when we come back together. Not this week, not even next week, but a couple weeks from now when we finally have our day in the classroom together. Okonkwo, is he strong or is he weak? Depends a lot on your definition of strength and weakness. Are the women strong or are they weak? Okonkwo's wife, strong or weak? Daughters, strong or weak? What are the Umwakian people's definitions of that? What are your definitions of that? What is a chi-based definition of those words? There's nuance there, and I encourage you to find it. Okay, hopefully I can edit this down into something that is worth watching, and I'll actually see you remotely on Friday. Remember to check into class at the very beginning. You'll be so practiced up by the time you get to me, but here's your reminder anyways, that when class starts, you're clicking on the Meet classroom inside Google Classroom, and I'll be there waiting to start our hot seats. We will be doing it. Bye. See you.